So today I want to go over what's been my favorite Druid build of Season 11 that basically turns you into a bulldozer. Your main damaging abilities are able to be used while moving in this build, so you never have to stop moving, and the build is actually incredibly strong. It's one of the top 3 Druid builds this season, and this is going to be a Boulder Druid. So we can start off by going over our mythics and our uniques, and we should start off with the item that actually enables the build to work, which is the Dolmen Stone Necklace. And the special is casting Boulder while Hurricane is active causes the boulder to rotate around you instead. Boulder's damage is increased by up to 50% for each one currently rotating, and you can have 10 rotating around you at a time. So the build is basically use Hurricane, have Hurricane up 100% of the time, and spam boulders. They'll all rotate around you, basically stuck in your Hurricane, and constantly damage everything as they rotate around you, and you just keep spamming Boulder. And one of the really good parts about this build, like I mentioned, is that you can cast Boulder while moving. This is a change done a handful of seasons ago, but it's made the Boulder Druid incredibly fun because you get to just basically become this bulldozer that has all these boulders rotating around you. Boulders knock things back and CC them while doing a ton of damage, so it's just incredibly fun. Then for another mythic that you need for this build to work, you have Vasily's Prayer. So your Earth skills are now also Werebear skills and Fortify you for some amount of your max health. So you're getting some Fortify, and your Earth skills are now also Werebear skills, which just adds in a bunch of different scaling and different effects. Then for our final normal unique, we have Tybalt's Will. So you deal increased damage when unstoppable and 5 seconds after. And the stats on this are also quite good to shore up some of the additional stats we want. And then for our mythics, we're using 2 of them. Shroud of False Death +1 to all passives is just crazy. You would use this even if it had nothing else on it. But then the +2 all stats allows you to get the secondary bonuses of all the rare nodes in your Paragon boards. We don't really care about the unique effect of this. The stats and the passives are really good. Then for our final mythic, we're using Ring of Starless Skies. So spending your primary resource reduces the resource cost of your skills by 10%, up to 50%. It also increases their damage, and the stats on this is also just pretty ridiculous. And that brings us into our skill tree, starting with 1 point into Claw. We will use this to stack up one of our passives. Then we're going down 1 point into Earthen Bulwark, just a big barrier. Upgrade 1 makes you unstoppable. Upgrade 2 gives you a big Fortify. Then 1 point into Cyclone Armor. This just gives you non-physical damage reduction. Upgrade 1 makes enemies vulnerable. Upgrade 2 pulls in enemies to us, which can help a little bit with this build. And then we're going down 1 point into Hurricane, which is obviously to catch all of our boulders. Then upgrade 1 slows enemies. Upgrade 2 makes them deal less damage, so it's actually really good for a damage reduction as well. Then we have 5 points on a boulder, our main damaging ability. Upgrade 1, when boulder overpowers, it stuns enemies, so slowing on this doesn't really matter. And then Savage Boulder. Boulder now poisons enemies that it hits. Now this is primarily to proc a bunch of other effects because we don't have other ways to just poison everything all the time. This does it, and we don't really need the other upgrade anyway. Then we're going down 1 point into Petrify, which is going to be our ultimate. Just stuns everything for 4 seconds. And then when we cast this, it resets all of our non-ultimate cooldowns, which can help a little bit, but that's not super important. Upgrade 1, you deal increased critical strike damage to the petrified enemies, and even more critical strike damage against bosses, and the duration is increased against bosses. Then killing an enemy that is petrified reduces the cooldown by 1 second, and just hitting a boss reduces the cooldown by 10. So you can very easily get the cooldown back very quickly with Petrify, which will just give us massive damage increases. Also CCs everything if you're doing like pit runs and stuff, which can be really good as well. Then we have our passives, 1 into Heart of the Wild to get 3 into Wild Impulses. Core skills cost more, but deal more damage. Also, because of one of our legendary aspects, Boulder is a core skill that has a spirit cost. So everything that would normally affect a core skill affects Boulder. Then we have 3 into Backlash for increased damage after using a defensive, 3 into Tetra Fortitude for increased resistances, 3 into Vigilance for DR after using a defensive. These will basically always be up if you make sure to keep spamming your defensives. 3 into Feral Aptitude, increased damage while healthy, more damage while above 100% move speed. We have 3 into Mending, primarily for the increased max life. 3 into Crushing Earth. Earth skills deal increased damage to CC's enemies. And then 3 into Stone Guard. While Fortified, your Earth skills deal increased damage. Now, if you don't have a Shroud of False Death, you should probably also put 1 point into Safeguard, but Shroud of False Death will give this, so we don't really need to put a point into it. Then 3 into Defiance. Nature skills do increased damage to elites. 3 into Natural Disaster. Your Earth skills do increased damage to vulnerable enemies. And 3 into Resonance. So Nature skills do increased damage. Triple this if it's an Earth skill skill after a storm skill. So this can happen every once in a while just because we're casting Hurricane, but primarily just a damage increase. 3 into Catastrophe, increased damage after using an ultimate, which we can use quite a lot. 3 into Quick Shift, which just gives us increased damage when we shapeshift, stacking up. So what you'll do is you'll claw boulder, claw boulder, claw boulder. That'll stack it up. Then once you stay in animal form, which will be werebear, this will just stay stacked up because it doesn't lose duration. Then heightened senses, gain damage reduction while in werebear, increase move speed while in werewolf. These will both stay when you're in any animal form. Then we have Urzine Strength for our capstone, increase max life, more damage, and more overpowered damage while in werebear. And I almost skipped it, but we have 1 into Neurotoxin. Poison enemies are slowed, so anything we hit is slowed, which will proc a bunch of effects. 3 into Toxic Claws for increased poison damage. 3 into Envenom for increased critical strike damage against poison enemies. So this is really the big area in which we take poisoning, so we get massive damage increases. Then we have our Paragon boards. The first board has the Earth and Sky Glyph, a bonus to magic nodes within range. The secondaries, Nature Skills do increase damage to CC or vulnerable. The legendaries increase nature magic damage. The first board is Survival Instincts, which while in werebear deal increased damage even more when full life. Then when enemies get lower life, you deal more overpowered damage to them. The glyph is Keeper, a bonus to rare nodes within range. The secondaries, you and your companions do increase non-physical damage. The legendaries increase non-physical damage. Pretty much all of our damage is converted to poison. Then the next board is going to be Earth and Devastation. Earth skills do increase critical strike damage. The glyph is Dominate for increased overpower damage. Then the secondary, when you overpower an enemy, they take more damage from you. The legendaries increase overpower damage. The next board is going to be Heightened Malice. Poison enemies near you give you more damage. This stacks up for more enemies. Then the glyph is Spirit, so an increase to critical strike damage. The secondary, when you crit an enemy, they take increased damage from you, stacking up. The legendaries increase critical strike damage. Then the final board is Constricting Tendrils. We only care about the increased damage to poisoned enemies. The glyph is Fang and Claw. The glyph is Fang and Claw, a bonus to magic nodes within range, while in werebear, deal increased damage to close enemies, and then the legendaries increase shapeshift damage. Then we have our Spirit Boons, Wariness to take reduced damage from elites. If you somehow have spirit problems, you can take Gift of the Stag, but I don't think you'll have to. We have Iron Feather for increased max life, Avian Wraith for increased critical strike damage. We have Energize, which is a lucky hit, a chance to fully restore your spirit. I don't think you'll actually need this, but there's nothing else really on this row that is going to give you much use anyway. And then Obsidian Slam, every 6 attack will cause your next Earth skill to overpower. So you just keep spamming boulders, you'll keep getting more boulder overpowers. And then for our mercenaries, you have a bunch of different options. If you need more defensives, you can go right here, but I just go Subo primarily for Seeker. Currently with the gear I have, I don't have maxed out movement speed. I'm slightly off, so I take Ready at Hand, where dealing direct damage to an elite gives you increased movement speed. Then you go down for Opening Fire. You deal increased critical strike damage to enemies hit by Subo's cover fire. Then the reinforcement is Variana with Bloodthirst, so when she casts this, we also gain increased attack speed and just put it on boulder or whatever ability you want. Then for our divine gifts, the top section, Essence of Lies to fortify every second. The right section is Essence of Screams, which gives you increased resistances. The bottom section, Essence of Sin for increased armor. Then the left section, when you become injured, get a max barrier, 20-second cooldown. And then that brings us into our gear, starting with our gems. So in 2 armor pieces, you want willpower. In your jewelry, you just want all diamonds for resist to all elements. Generally going to be the best. You can do skulls for physical resistance if you need it, but I think usually diamond's going to be the best. And then we have our rune sets, which we have Igni Watt. So Swords Offering every 0.3 seconds. You cast basically any non-basic skill. It'll give you the offering, and that will invoke the Necromancer's Horde Decrepify, slowing enemies, reducing their damage, and letting you execute them. Execute can actually be pretty nice, but this is primarily to proc our other set, which is invoke a skill from another class, which is only 2 times, which happens very quickly, and this will give us 0.25 seconds of all crits and overpower, so just some pretty big damage increases. You also don't necessarily need this. You can use pretty much any other like rune combination you want. If you need to be more tanky, you can use the one that gives Earthern Bulwark from the Druid to us. You could even change up some of your points in your skill tree if you want more points in Earthern Bulwark, or pretty much any other set combination. This is just a really consistent one. And then we already went over our uniques and our mythics. So for our 3 legendary aspects on your 2-handed weapon, you want deal increased poison damage while shapeshift and your direct damage is converted into poison. So all the damage we deal is poison, and we deal massively increased poison damage. This will proc a bunch of other things, give us a bunch of additional damage scaling, so it's just really good in general. Our other offensive aspects are your core skills deal up to 75% increased damage based on your fortify. We are always basically fully fortified. fortified. Then our final offensive aspect, Boulder is also a core skill and costs 40 spirit to cast, dealing 160% of normal damage. So Boulder is now a core skill and it just deals more damage. You need this for this build to actually work. Then for our final aspect on our boots, while Hurricane is active, gain +5 ranks to your shapeshifting skills. So basically all of our skills, or our main ones, including Boulder, get +5 ranks, which is quite a lot of multiplicative damage increase while our Hurricane is active. If you follow all the stats and different things that I have in this build, your Hurricane will easily always be up. Now for some of our more important stat rolls on your weapon, you obviously want a chance for Boulder to deal double damage. You want the roll that's a lucky hit to make enemies vulnerable. That'll be really good on a 2-handed weapon. It'll pretty much always get to 100% when you upgrade that weapon. On your boots, you're definitely going to want Hurricane Duration as your tempering. That's going to be super, super nice as well. And then on your ring, that's probably the most important role of this build, is the tempering role. The casting Wraith skills restores 25 primary resource. Mine's 25. Yours might be a little bit less or more, but that doesn't really matter because when you mix this with all of our other reductions on spirit, including things like Ring of Starless Skies, we basically don't use spirit, or we just get so much back from this one tempering roll, and our Boulder costs so little compared to what it normally does. We basically don't spend spirit. Now we actually do, which can proc some other effects, but it just doesn't look like we do because we have so much resource cost reductions from specifically our weapon and a Ring of Starless Skies, and then we gain so much from this one thing every time we cast Boulder that our spirit never moves. But that's the entirety of this Druid Boulder build. This build is just so incredibly fun because it feels so good to play. I am very glad they did a change where you can cast Boulder while moving. It's just so incredibly nice because basically all you do, you pop your Hurricane, you spam boulders around you while you're constantly moving through enemies, and you can only have 10 boulders on you, but you want to always keep casting because it'll proc a bunch of other effects. Then you just keep rotating your defenses for different buffs and for the defensive aspects themselves. Then you petrify pretty much as you want. Anytime you're on a boss, use it on cooldown. When you get to a big group of enemies, use your petrify, kill them all. It'll basically give you it back. So just incredibly fun, incredibly strong Druid build. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.